British farming history is full of surprises, and some of its most impressive feats came not from quiet innovation, but from machines so outrageous they redefined the limits of agricultural design. From wartime DNA to orchard-sized crawlers, they didn't just help the harvest, they reimagined what a tractor could be. Here are the 15 insane British tractors that shattered expectations. Number 15, Darby Steam Digger. Before tractors became icons of horsepower and hydraulics, one British machine attempted something no one had ever seen. It tried to walk. The Darby Steam Digger wasn't just early, it was radical. And in the year 1879, it stunned both farmers and engineers by proposing an alternative to wheels altogether. At a glance, it looked more like a steampunk insect than a working machine. But what it promised was nothing less than a revolution in tillage. Rather than roll through the soil like traditional engines, the Darby was built to march across the field one mechanical step at a time. This strange contraption was the invention of Thomas Darby of Essex, who believed that steam power could be harnessed in a new and more efficient way. Where wheeled tractors often slipped or sank in heavy soils, Darby proposed a solution that mimicked how animals moved through the land, one leg at a time. 6 steel feet were mounted on rocker arms and driven by a central gear train, allowing the machine to literally step across fields while pulling a plow behind it. And unlike traditional traction engines, which were better suited to level ground, this walking approach was intended to cope with wet or uneven farmland. Somewhere within its riveted frame sat a vertical single-cylinder steam engine, displacing roughly 5,200 cubic centimeters, which equals about 317 cubic inches. Fueled by coal and water-fed from a rear-mounted tank, the unit delivered a slow but consistent output, just enough to power the foot mechanism and traction gear together. Speed was never the selling point. The Darby barely surpassed 1 mile per hour, but its slow steps helped reduce soil disturbance and slippage. And for farmers in the late 19th century, that made it a promising concept. The design even aimed to reduce compaction by distributing weight over 6 mechanical limbs instead of narrow wheels, an idea that wouldn't become widespread until a century later. Although the torque figures weren't formally recorded, engineers later estimated the machine could generate over 75 pound-feet, which allowed it to haul a multi-share plow through stubborn British clay. But as innovative as it was, the Darby was plagued by balance issues. With every stride, the machine rocked violently from side to side, creating stress on its joints and cams. Operators reported that it had trouble maintaining consistent rhythm across hilly or broken terrain. Eventually, the walking mechanism was abandoned in favor of a more conventional wheel system, but the attempt itself was unforgettable. Though the Darby Steam Digger didn't succeed commercially, it captured something rare in agricultural machinery: imagination. In an era when most machines were content to follow the ruts left behind, Darby set out to make his own path. Number 14, Ivel Tractor. Not every revolution comes with smoke, noise, or giant steel wheels. Sometimes it begins with a quiet hum and a frame light enough for one man to maneuver. In the late 19th century, when steam still ruled the countryside and horses were the default power source, a curious machine emerged from a small English workshop and rewrote the rules of mechanized farming. That machine was the Ivel agricultural motor, and its story began in the year 1898, long before tractors had even earned their name. Created by Dan Albone in Biggleswade, Bedfordshire, the Ivel was designed to do something no British farm machine had managed before: bring motorized power to small-scale farms without overwhelming them. Albone envisioned a tractor that was simple, versatile, and economical enough for the average farmer, not just wealthy estates or industrial operations. With its 3-wheel layout and compact build, it offered a middle ground between hand labor and heavy equipment. Power came from a modest, yet dependable petrol engine, tucked low into its slender chassis. This horizontally mounted unit displaced around 3,800 cubic centimeters, which equals approximately 232 cubic inches. For its time, it was a compact power plant, chosen for steady output rather than brute force. Unlike steam engines that took hours to prepare, the Ivel could be fired up and ready to go in minutes. It traveled at a top speed of roughly 4 miles per hour, which may sound unremarkable today, but at the time, that pace effectively doubled a farmer's productivity compared to traditional methods. The tractor was also road legal, allowing it to pull small loads between fields and villages without switching to a cart or wagon. Though it produced only about 8 horsepower, the Ivel could handle a surprising range of tasks, from belt-driven machinery to shallow tillage and light hauling. Its torque rating neared 42 pound-feet, a figure that let it pull a single plowshare or drive a threshing drum without breaking stride. This balance of power and efficiency made it ideal for mixed-use farms where versatility mattered more than raw output. In hindsight, the Ivel didn't just introduce a new machine, it introduced a new mindset. It showed farmers that petrol-powered equipment could be practical, economical, and suited for everyday work. While larger tractors would soon dominate the headlines, it was the Ivel that quietly laid the foundation for Britain's mechanical age in agriculture. Number 13, Saunderson G. At a time when Britain was just beginning to shift away from animal labor, the Saunderson Tractor and Implement Company stepped forward with a design that promised a new path for agriculture. The year was 1916, and with war disrupting traditional supply chains and manpower, the demand for self-propelled farm machinery had never been greater. Among the company's most practical and best-known contributions was the Saunderson G, a tractor that blended mechanical simplicity with field-ready durability. Built in Elstow, Bedfordshire, the Saunderson G represented a step up from the earliest experimental designs of the decade. It wasn't flashy, but that was never the point. Its construction was straightforward, centered around a solid steel frame and generous ground clearance, allowing it to handle varied terrain without risk of grounding out. This made it especially suitable for British farms that dealt with wet soil and uneven fields. Power came from a 4-cylinder liquid-cooled engine manufactured by Crossley Motors, with a displacement of approximately 6,200 cubic centimeters, equal to roughly 379 cubic inches. Though modest by today's standards, this engine was considered advanced for its time, particularly because it could run consistently without overheating under heavy load. Rather than rely on brute speed, the Saunderson G was geared for controlled, dependable motion. Its top speed approached 4 miles per hour, making it fast enough for field work, while still being slow enough to offer precise control during plowing or cultivation. Horsepower output was rated near 25 horsepower, which gave it the strength needed for mid-sized implements like harrows and early moldboard plows. Its true advantage lay in the torque delivery, estimated at around 78 pound-feet, a figure that allowed the tractor to manage tasks that required continuous pulling force rather than bursts of power. This made it ideal for deep tillage in heavy soil, or for operating belt-driven equipment at a stationary position. When Saunderson was absorbed by Crossley Motors in 1924, the G quietly faded from production, but its influence did not. It was one of the first British tractors to prove that reliable, gasoline-powered machines could thrive in everyday farm life, and that simple engineering, when done right, could outlast even the most complex ideas. What you've seen so far is only the beginning. The next tractors didn't just farm fields, they changed expectations forever. Hit like if you're enjoying this story, subscribe for more, and stick around for the boldest machines Britain ever built. Number 12. Massey Ferguson 35. When the British countryside needed a machine that could both preserve the legacy of Harry Ferguson and push into a new era of mass mechanization, the Massey Ferguson 35 was born. Its journey began in the year 1956, when the Ferguson 35 made its grand debut at the Grosvenor House Hotel in London, replacing the beloved Little Grey Fergie with a machine that blended change with continuity. Named for its broad appeal rather than any single feature, it carried forward the pioneering hydraulics and three-point linkage pioneered by Ferguson, and yet it looked forward with updated styling nicknamed Gold Belly for its bronze-colored body and gray shell. Built in Coventry, it quickly became a fixture across British fields and small holdings, thanks to its balanced mix of power, versatility, and affordability. Under the smooth body, the engine was a modest but reliable power plant of roughly 4,000 cubic centimeters, which equals around 244 cubic inches. Its purpose was not to overwhelm, but to deliver resilient performance across varied tasks. And many farmers found that this faithfully translated into steady tilling, hauling, and implement work. Though it didn't blaze across fields, its top speed of approximately 8 miles per hour offered just enough pace to move between plots with surprising efficiency, especially compared with traditional draft methods. The horsepower was listed near 44 horsepower for the later MF35X models, giving it the grunt to handle heavier attachments like loaders and power takeoff-driven machines. The tractor's true charm lay in its torque, estimated at around 87 pound-feet, providing consistent pulling strength that made steady work of uneven terrain or heavy soil without constantly lurching or stalling. Combined with its solid mechanical simplicity, these strengths explain why over 388,000 tractors were built in Britain by the time production ended in late 1964. Number 11. Ferguson TE20. In the aftermath of the Second World War, British agriculture faced a crossroads between traditional draft animals and industrial-scale mechanization, and it was in that moment, in the year 1946, that the Ferguson TE20 emerged as a visionary solution. Created by Harry Ferguson in collaboration with the Standard Motor Company, this diminutive machine, affectionately dubbed the Little Gray Fergie, set out not only to replace horses, but to redefine what a tractor could do in the field. At a glance, its modest proportions belied its impact, and the backbone of that effectiveness lay in its ingenious hydraulic three-point hitch system. Dubbed the Ferguson system, it integrated the implement and the machine into one coordinated working unit, allowing for automatic draft control and depth regulation in a way no tractor before had managed. It turned the tractor and attached tool into a single precision instrument and revolutionized how plows, harrows, and seed drills operated across farms worldwide. Power was delivered through a practical yet dependable petrol engine developed by Standard, with a displacement of approximately 1,150 cubic centimeters, which equals roughly 113 cubic inches. Though mild in size, that humble engine was tuned to provide reliable torque and fuel efficiency, and it could be started, serviced, and operated with far less fuss than its bulky competitors. The TE20 wasn't built for speed, yet its top pace of just over 4 miles per hour allowed farmers to cover ground swiftly enough to matter without sacrificing control during critical field work. With a drawbar horsepower of around 20 at 20.7 horsepower and belt power reaching 25.41 horsepower, it struck a rare balance between modest output and practical versatility. Its torque delivery was steady and unyielding, providing consistent pull without stalling, even when tasked with heavy implements or tough soil. And its 4-speed gearbox, paired with integrated hydraulic lift, made it a nimble companion in the field, surprisingly agile despite its perceived fragility. With over 500,000 units built between 1946 and 1956, the TE20 wasn't just prolific, it was transformative, allowing farms of all sizes to adopt mechanization with confidence. Its legacy endures in the design of nearly every tractor produced today, and its influence, both technical and cultural, ensures that the Little Gray Fergie remains one of the most insane and unquestionably ingenious tractors Britain ever made. Number 10. Track Marshal 56. In post-war Britain, as agricultural terrain demanded more traction than wheeled tractors could deliver, a bold creature grew quietly in Gainsborough, Lincolnshire. Emerging from the marriage of Marshall and Fowler, the Track Marshal Crawler offered farmers something that looked less like a farm machine and more like a tank with farming instincts. Among its notable descendants stood the Track Marshal 56, introduced in 1969 when the era of high-horsepower wheeled tractors was just beginning to chip away at crawler dominance. Where conventional tractors suffocated in wet, boggy fields, the 56 thrived. With its welded steel tracks, it climbed slopes, churned sticky mud, and hauled implements with aplomb, redefining what a tractor could endure in rural Britain. Beneath that yellow-painted behemoth lay a 4-cylinder Perkins diesel engine of just under 6,000 cubic centimeters, which equals approximately 360 cubic inches, chosen for its rugged reliability more than flashy power. That engine delivered about 56 horsepower, a modest number by wheel tractor standards of the day, yet in the crawler context, it meant relentless forward creep through ground other machines would choke on. The rear-mounted 3-point linkage provided versatility unheard of in earlier crawlers, turning the 56 into a genuine agricultural workhorse, capable of not just pushing and pulling, but also lifting and driving implements. Despite its tank-like demeanor, the Track Marshal 56 was neither slow nor ungainly. Its top speed edged close to 6 miles per hour, allowing operators to stroke between fields with surprising efficiency. That pace was matched by torque that was steady and unyielding, estimated at around 92 pound-feet, enough to tug a heavy cultivator out of sticky loam without stalling. The genius of this tractor lay not only in what it could do, but where it could do it, in fields where wheeled machines simply wouldn't go. Farmers embraced it for hillside farms and saturated grasslands, and even today, the sight of a restored 56 at a steam show still draws admiration, not just for its brute strength, but for the daring concept it represented. By 1975, when production ended, The era of crawler dominance was fading, but the Track Marshall 56 remained a testament to British ingenuity. In a world moving towards sleek modernity, this ironclad crawler stood proud, as proof that sometimes doing the insanely rugged thing is exactly what the field demands. Number 9. Fowler VF Crawler. By the late 1940s, much of British agriculture was still adjusting to post-war challenges. Tractors were becoming more common, but wet, heavy soils in parts of the country still limited the usefulness of wheeled machines. That is where the Fowler VF Crawler made its mark. Introduced in the year 1948, it came from a company better known for steam plowing engines than diesel-powered tractors. But the VF proved that Fowler still understood how to build machines for the toughest ground conditions. The VF was designed for traction before anything else. Rather than relying on rubber tires, it moved on steel tracks that gripped the ground with steady pressure. This gave it a key advantage in wet or unstable soil, where wheeled tractors often sank or lost traction. The machine's low ground pressure, wide track base, and slow travel speed were deliberate design choices meant to ensure forward movement under load, no matter the surface. Power came from a single-cylinder diesel engine with a displacement of around 4,890 cubic centimeters, equal to roughly 298 cubic inches. Though the engine was basic, it was known for its durability and ease of maintenance. Starting was done with a crank handle and required skill, but once running, the engine could work all day without issue. Its drawbar horsepower was rated near 40 horsepower, which was more than enough for the types of implements it was designed to pull. The top speed of the machine was under 4 miles per hour, which made it slow but steady. Torque was estimated at around 110 pound-feet, and that consistent pulling strength made it ideal for deep cultivation and land reclamation. Although not suited for every farm, the VF Crawler filled an important role on wet or hilly ground, where lighter tractors failed. It was heavy, loud, and often uncomfortable to operate, but it did exactly what it was built for. In the years that followed, many British farmers continued to rely on the VF long after newer machines became available, simply because it refused to quit. Number 8. Vickers Vigor 180. At first glance, it was hard to tell whether the Vickers VR 180 was heading into a battlefield or a barley field. Built in the early 1950s by Vickers Armstrongs, a company known more for tanks than tractors, this machine carried more military DNA than most farm equipment ever would. Nicknamed the Vigor, it didn't just look out of place. It redefined what a crawler tractor could be. The story began in the year 1952 when Vickers introduced the VR 180 as a heavy-duty agricultural crawler for export markets. Post-war reconstruction had created new demands across the globe, especially in places where soft ground, remote terrain, or lack of roads made conventional tractors ineffective. Instead of adapting a farm machine, Vickers essentially reworked a tank design, keeping the military-style undercarriage and suspension that allowed the Vigor to travel across ground that would swallow a wheeled machine whole. The powertrain was equally overbuilt. A 6-cylinder diesel engine built by Rolls-Royce sat at the core, displacing around 12,170 cubic centimeters, or roughly 743 cubic inches. Although it was officially rated near 190 horsepower, the real story was how that power was delivered, steadily, with high torque and at low speeds, exactly what was needed to drag heavy implements through harsh terrain. Its top speed was just under 10 miles per hour, but it wasn't designed for transport. It was made to move when others couldn't. The articulated track system, inspired by tank suspension, gave it unmatched traction, especially in remote bushlands and swampy regions. That same complexity, however, also made it high maintenance. Tracks could wear unevenly or detrack under stress, and its sheer size made repairs far from simple. Only about 1,500 units were produced before production ended in 1958. But during its short run, the Vigor left a lasting impression. It wasn't just a tractor, it was a machine built for terrain where farming wasn't supposed to be possible. In doing so, it didn't just defy expectations, it ignored them completely. Number 7. Doe Triple D. In the late 1950s, farmers in Essex were crying out for a tractor powerful enough to conquer the region's heavy clay soils, yet none of the standard models could deliver. That is when George Pryor, a resourceful farmer, took matters into his own hands. He took 2 Fordson tractors, removed their front wheels, and connected them via a turntable coupled with hydraulic rams. What rolled out of his fields wasn't just a unique contraption. It was the seed of what would become the Doe Triple D. When local dealers Ernest Doe and Sons caught wind of Pryor's invention, they saw more than just a clever farm fix. They saw a machine that could redefine British farm power. In 1958, they built the first prototype, proudly calling it the Doe Dual Power, which soon evolved into the Doe Dual Drive, and eventually acquired its memorable name, the Doe Triple D. This machine was unapologetically large and powerful, combining two Fordson Power Major engines to generate roughly 100 horsepower. Later upgrades paired dual Ford 5000 units, boosting output to more than 130 horsepower, and eventually reaching 150 horsepower in its final iteration. Those numbers weren't just figures. They translated directly into the ability to pull heavier plows and drive deeper furrows on fields that had once defeated conventional tractors. Operating the Triple D was as unconventional as its design. The driver sat on the rear half and controlled two engines and two gearboxes in tandem. That meant coordinating both sides carefully, and changing forward gears sometimes required getting off and reaching to the front tractor. This complexity made it quirky, demanding, and fascinating in equal measure. Despite its flair, the Triple D faced challenges. Few implements could match its raw power, leading Ernest Doe and Sons to design and produce suitable plows, cultivators, and toolbars just to keep pace with the machine. Maintenance was doubled, too, with two engines and two gearboxes to service, increasing both labor and breakdown risk. Production continued into the late 1960s, with more than 300 units built. When single-engine tractors began matching its horsepower, the appeal of the Doe's duo-engine madness faded, and production ended. Yet the Doe Triple D remains a beloved oddity at agricultural shows, an audacious solution that broke the mold and helped reshape what was possible on British farmland. Number 6. County Super 4. In the soggy lowlands of Britain, where tractors sank before they could pull, one machine changed everything. Not by being bigger, but by being cleverer. The County Super 4 was born from frustration. British farmers needed grip, not glamour. And in the early 1960s, county commercial cars offered them a tractor that didn't just pull, it clawed through terrain where others gave up. What made the Super 4 different wasn't just mechanical, it was philosophical. Most tractors at the time relied on narrow front wheels and rear drive, a design that failed miserably in mud-prone regions. County engineers flipped the formula, giving the Super 4 four equally sized wheels and permanent four-wheel drive. The result wasn't subtle. It looked like a military vehicle, but it worked like a bulldog, low, wide, stubborn, and unshakably balanced. Its engine, based on a Ford diesel block, displaced just under 4,000 cubic centimeters, equal to around 244 cubic inches. But horsepower alone wasn't the goal. The County Super 4 was about usable strength, torque that came early, stayed steady, and refused to quit. With around 123 pound-feet of torque available, it didn't need to be fast. It needed to be relentless. Out in the field, it felt like it had teeth. The evenly split power between the front and rear axles meant it didn't flinch on hills. And in deep muck, where other tractors spun and sank, the Super 4 kept moving. This wasn't a luxury. It was survival. In counties like Cornwall, Devon, or Cumbria, where weather turned soil into syrup, this tractor became the difference between planting on time and losing a season. Yet what truly made the County Super 4 insane wasn't just its performance, it was the timing. In an era when four-wheel drive on a tractor sounded excessive or even laughable, County dared to build a machine that treated all terrain as fair game. Farmers didn't just buy it, they trusted it with their most difficult acres. And in return, the Super 4 proved that traction wasn't a feature, it was a revolution. Number 5. Ransoms MG6. In post-war Britain, where orchards and vineyards squeezed every inch of use from the land, Ransoms, Sims, and Jeffries introduced a machine that looked small but worked mighty. In the year 1953, they unveiled the MG6 at the Smithfield Show, an unassuming compact crawler that challenged expectations by trimming both size and complexity without sacrificing capability. The MG6 wasn't born from wild ambition, but from thoughtful necessity. Many British growers had fields creased with narrow rows and soft soils that ate up standard tractors. Ransoms seized that gap, transforming their Motor Garden series into something deceptively powerful. With flexible roadless tracks, it could slip between trees and emerge unscathed on soft ground, offering a gentle footprint where larger machines would bruise both the soil and the crop. Under its stout hood sat a single-cylinder petrol engine, displacing 600 cubic centimeters, equal to roughly 37 cubic inches, modest by typical standards. Yet what it lacked in displacement, it made up for in utility. That little engine was paired with a 3-speed gearbox and an optional hydraulic linkage, features that turned it into an all-purpose orchard workhorse, capable of cultivating, mowing, towing, or power takeoff work. Its working pace was more about finesse than speed, reaching gentle forward speeds around 4 miles per hour. It sliced through tight rows without roughing edges, and its compact 1,400-pound stature let operators maneuver between fruiting branches without damage or drama. Torque was low in numbers, but consistent in feel, providing enough tractability to pull small implements or operate belt machinery without fuss. The MG6 wasn't about raw power. It was about precision in confined or delicate spaces. Growers embraced it not because it impressed by force, but because it delivered where others couldn't reach. By the time production ended in 1960, over 4,000 of these little crawlers had been built, each confirmed in its unusual success by quietly doing the jobs that bigger, louder tractors couldn't. For its era, it was insane to think a crawler so small could handle such diverse tasks. But that was precisely its genius. Where large tractors thundered through open fields, the MG6 tiptoed through orchards. It defied the tractor hierarchy, not with brute strength, but with subtle effectiveness. Number 4. David Brown, 2D. When most tractors were built for brute power, one British machine quietly challenged the idea that strength had to come at a grand scale. The story began in the year 1956, when David Brown unveiled the 2D at its Meltham Mills factory in Huddersfield. Unlike bulky farm giants, the 2D was lean, nimble, and intentionally built for gardens, nurseries, and market gardeners, a profile unusual enough to earn it a spot among history's most audacious tractors. Its appearance immediately raised eyebrows. Rather than the typical layout of 2 rear drive wheels and a fixed front axle, the 2D featured just one small caster wheel up front and 2 larger drive wheels at the rear. This slender, tricycle-like design delivered an impossibly tight turning radius, allowing operators to pivot on a dime. For anyone cultivating tight rows or bedding plants by hand, this was no longer just a convenience. It became a precision tool. Power came from a modest diesel engine, a twin-cylinder unit displacing roughly 1,300 cubic centimeters, which equals about 79 cubic inches. That figure might sound unremarkable, yet it brought enough low-end grunt to the grooves, where every turn counted. Rated at around 14 horsepower, it did more than move. It responded to operator input with subtlety, not force, a quality increasingly rare at a time when tractors turned bigger meant better. Its 4-speed gearbox and lightweight frame gave it a light feel in the field. But what truly set it apart was the driver's vantage point. The tractor's layout provided clear visibility of any implement it towed. For operators closely planting seedlings or weeding delicate rows, that view made all the difference. Despite its petite form, the 2D carried a weight of about 1,900 pounds, giving it enough ground pressure for smooth traction without bogging down soft soil. It was built to go where others couldn't, between tender rows, along nursery beds, or inside greenhouses, and it did so with unexpected authority. Though production ended by 1961, the 2D didn't fade from memory. Its willingness to be small, precise, and purpose-built made it downright radical for its time. It refused to be ignored, and in doing so, cemented its place on the list of Britain's most unexpected tractor legends. Number 3. Muir Hill 101. In the late 1960s, a small engineering firm in Manchester dared to step into the deep end of agricultural innovation. That firm was Muir Hill, known for shovels and dumpers rather than tractors. But in the year 1968, they turned heads by launching the Muir Hill 101, their first proper 4-wheel drive tractor, built for workhorses rather than hobbyists. Muir Hill had roots stretching back to modifying Fordson tractors for industrial use. But the 101 was different. Built around a Ford 5.9-liter 6-cylinder diesel engine, displacing about 5,900 cubic centimeters, equal to roughly 360 cubic inches, it offered a staggering jump in traction and power for British farms that needed serious muscle. At a time when 2-wheel or narrow-wheeled tractors dominated, this machine wore 4 equal-sized tires and a heavy, short body that looked more like a construction vehicle than a farm machine. Rather than being streamlined, it wore its bulk with purpose. Its engine produced around 108 horsepower. But what truly transformed Fields was the torque, estimated in the range of 253 pound-feet, which let it pull deep, wide plows without batting an eye. What made it insane wasn't just raw power, it was how it handled itself. With a wheelbase that felt stubby and a 4x4 system that stayed locked in, it could spin, slide, and haul on soggy ground that swallowed conventional tractors. In trials, it pulled 4-furrow reversible plows that would have flattened most machines of its era. It wasn't merely a field bulldozer. Muir Hill added power steering, an optional cab, and a versatile 8-speed box that later expanded into 16 speeds with creeper gear, granting it surprising finesse in planting or cultivating roles. Its form was squat and practical, painted in construction yellow to stand out in a sea of green and red machines. Although production was short-lived, ending in 1972, the 101 became a cult classic. Number 2, Roadless Plowmaster 65. In the swinging 60s, when tractors were still largely two-wheel drive and tractors bogged down before boots hit the plow, one converted machine charged into the mud and redefined what farm traction could mean. The year 1964 saw roadless traction in Hounslow launch the Plowmaster 65, a four-wheel drive beast built not in a rural workshop, but a quirky corner of Middlesex. The Plowmaster 65 started life as a Ford 5000, but roadless didn't simply slap on bigger tires. They grafted on a full four-wheel drive system, turned it into a proper 4x4, and relaunched it as something more purposeful. That transformation turned everyday tractors into ground grippers that refused to slide, sink, or stall. Beneath that rugged shell worked a 4-cylinder Ford diesel engine, displacing 4,990 cubic centimeters, equal to roughly 304 cubic inches. At a glance, that power plant looked familiar, but coupled to a 4-drive transfer case, it sparked extraordinary promise in fields other machines abandoned. The advertised output was 65 horsepower, but field reports often praised how much better it performed in bog and slope than that number implied. Its 8-speed gearbox, combined with 2-speed transfer, gave operators subtle control across tricky ground, while its roughly 148 pound-feet of torque meant it didn't just fight the terrain, it danced through it. In practice, farmers driving the Plowmaster 65 found they could tackle wet furrows and clay-heavy patches without waiting for sunny days or towing rigs. Unlike similarly spec'd wheeled rivals, it carried itself through marshes with a quiet tenacity, not a roar. Roadless built around 1,000 of these conversions before production ended in 1968. Each may have started as a Ford, but the Plowmaster 65 became something more, a private letter stamped four-wheel drive sent directly to the British farm fields that desperately needed it. Number 1, Nuffield Universal M4. When post-war Britain needed a tractor that would deliver both national pride and practical performance, the Nuffield Universal M4 stepped onto the stage and turned heads not with spectacle, but with quiet authority. The story began in the year 1948, when Morris Motors' agricultural division answered a government call for a truly British tractor. The result was revealed at the Smithfield show that December, and with its bold poppy orange hue, the Nuffield instantly stood out from the sea of drab farm machines. As one of the first all-British tractors of its kind, the M4 carried more than a Morris badge. Designed under the direction of Dr. H.E. Merritt, who had experience in tank and tractor engineering, it combined automotive know-how with agricultural necessity. The tractor's 4-cylinder side valve engine delivered around 42 horsepower, a respectable figure in the late 40s. Yet it was what it did with that power that mattered. That power plant displaced approximately 3.8 liters, which equals about 230.1 cubic inches, with liquid cooling and tuned for consistent torque. Speaking of torque, it offered roughly 138 pound-feet at 1,000 revolutions per minute, giving it dependable pulling strength rather than flashy acceleration. The Nuffield also introduced adjustable front and rear tracks, allowing wheel spacing to be altered by up to 8 inches, a feature unheard of back then but invaluable to farmers working varied row widths. It wasn't just a machine, but a finely tuned tool. Despite its unassuming form, the M4 broke expectations by proving that British engineering didn't need to mimic American giants to succeed. Over time, it laid the foundation for future Universal models, and even helped establish exports under the Nuffield and later Leyland name. From tank-inspired crawlers to double-engine giants, these machines shattered expectations with every turn of their wheels, Have a favorite? Drop it in the comments, smash the like button, and subscribe for more incredible stories from agricultural history.